Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super Fantify. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Somewhere Between. Another great episode. Very interesting developments this episode, where obviously Nico and Laura are working together to try and track down the second victim, and they end up helping her out. Her name is Mimi, and sadly, the killer still ended up getting to her. So it's something they kind of ended up bringing up this episode too, because it's like the first lady, she ended up dying, but then you had Nico being like, well, we moved a needle. It's like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean Serena's going to end up drowning? Her body's going to wash up in a different place? And it's like, it almost seems like time is still doing that whole correcting thing to a certain extent. Because it sucks because like everything lined up to make it so that Nico wouldn't be there. Like his car's being towed. He's like, okay, I'm going. But the moment he goes, like that's when the killer comes and gets Mimi. I mean, luckily for her, she's still alive. So that's good. I mean, granted, she's in a coma now, but that was close. It's like, how did it, I mean, I guess he studies his victims so he knows exactly where they live. I mean, it makes you wonder, did he set up that circumstances so that Nico would be out? Because it's like, that's too coincidental that just happens, or once again, fate trying to correct itself or something. Like, so it's like, is it fate or was it something the killer did? Which we ended up finding out the killer's face in this episode. I was actually surprised about that. That would be something we see much later on. It's like, no, the killer is actually Ruby's teacher. Didn't see that twist coming. But should have figured it was going to be I should have figured it would be someone you would see pop up in the show. That's typically how these things go. It's going to be a face that you're familiar with at some point. Whether it's immediately or not. But still, I wasn't expecting him to kind of show his face. This is literally the third episode. Granted, I don't know how long this series is going to be, but still. But even then, that whole circumstance gets a little murky, because it's like, he didn't kill Mimi, which is like, was he trying to? Because, Nico came back and he was there hiding and everything. Obviously, he's trying to put the twist on everyone and being like, no. Like, it's like, oh, Laura, making it twisted it up, being like, oh, Laura attacked me and everything, which technically she did. But it was under the circumstances of like, oh, yeah, he's attacking these ladies. But it's like, argument-wise, it's like there's no actual proof that he did it. I mean, granted, he has the wound and everything. But that was another thing, too, I was wondering is, like, when you actually think about it, how did he circle back around that quickly to the point that a cop would attack? Like, the cop, like, showed up and stabbed her. We saw that. I mean, well, killed the first victim. So it's like, how did he circle back around that fast? I was like, and changed his outfit, too? Now, well, no, because he did, because he was wounded. So, not unless because there's so much to this, because it's like, it's like, why are you doing this? Like, it's like, why is he targeting these particular people? And then something kind of crossed my mind, because I was doing it for the kids. It's a line that he was saying. And immediately my brain goes, is this something having to do with like, quote unquote, terrible parents or something? Does he have some kind of like vendetta against terrible moms? Because Mimi ends up revealing she gave up her child when like her kid was super young, like, was a baby, because like she's kind of a party girl and everything, and it's just like, oh, I'd rather my kid just grow up, thinking I was just kind of, give my child away. I think she has a son, give him away for the sake of like, hey, you just wanted a better life for you. But it's like, no, she's just a party girl. They didn't know what, responsibilities and everything, right? Which she does this thing where she knits sweaters every year of her kid's birthday. So, but that kind of made me start wondering, okay, like, because we know Laura has a kid. So, but then it's like, why would Serena die instead of Laura? Because it seems like if that was the case, he was targeting moms, not unless Serena was an accident. Which then even like later on when Laura's pulling a gun on him, which I was like, wasn't expecting that, like her to do that in a police station. At this point in time, she doesn't care, because she's already gotten in her head. Like, because even Nico was like at the beginning, like, hey, you stay there. I don't want you to get hurt. She's like, I don't care. Like, like, someone has to die for Serena to live. So it's a situation where she's, as long as like Serena lives, she doesn't care even if she dies. We've already established that, especially last week's episode. But now, like, the way he responded makes me think, because he was like, why would I hurt Serena? She's Ruby's best friend, So it's like, the thing is, he wouldn't target kids. So then that turns into another question of like, maybe it wasn't actually him who killed Serena. Maybe he is killing these people, but there's another killer at work here. And I'm starting to think it all ties into Tom too, because in this episode, we learned that Tom's basically holding evidence. At the beginning of the episode, I mean, we see that he's got a scarf, and obviously, Serena's kind of playing with it later on. And Grace, Ruby's grandmother, and Danny and Nico's mom ended up, dropping off a letter and some evidence she wanted to show to Laura, but she ends up seeing Serena playing with it. But we end up seeing that flashback, and it's like, oh, this is the scarf that Serena was strangled with. Like it was never found. Like the murder weapon, in fact, was never found. So now it begs the question of like, why does he have it? There's a whole thing of like stealing those jewelry at the end of the episode, which then kind of takes my mind back to the fact is that he's working for somebody, because the fact of the matter is he's texting someone, that person's like, don't call me on my personal line ever again, but sent them a picture of the scarf and the ring. So either it's like he's covering up evidence on multiple levels for either one thing my mind immediately goes to, and it was kind of initial thought, is he's covering up evidence because it's like they needed proof against Danny in that particular case. Like they make evidence disappear so it fits the narrative they need, because a scarf being around probably would have been evidence they needed to prove that it wasn't Danny or something, maybe there was evidence on it, whatever the case may be. So maybe that's what that is, like, or maybe it's someone that Tom is trying to keep at bay. Like maybe all this stuff, like, because the fact is Serena washed this scarf, so she washed away the blood and everything, and you see a look on Tom's face like, oh crap. So I'm guessing that was key evidence that kept the killer at bay and letting them, the real killer at bay or something. And maybe the same thing with these rings or something. Like, I don't know, like either he's keeping the real killer at bay, whether it's like it's someone who is blackmailing him to, like, Tom is being blackmailed by the killer to work for him. If that was the case, maybe the whole Serena being taken situation isn't the Ruby's teacher, that actually it is someone else. That's someone else who Tom owes stuff to. So that's why Serena got kidnapped, but she ended up dying because Tom didn't give them what they wanted or something. Like it seems like they use the excuse of Laura, but I think really it was Tom was the reason why Serena got kidnapped and died. So that's one thought. But another thought is, I mean, there's always the possibility that it's actually Tom himself who's the killer behind all that. I mean, I don't know, but it's like, it's hard to say. Like either they're covering up evidence just to fit their narrative so that they can, maybe he's working for someone powerful who's like, oh yeah, I want you to do this for me. We need to build this case. And maybe someone built their career off of framing Danny, and maybe that's a similar, I don't know. Because then what would this case have to do with the whole situation with Danny? Like, why would he cover up this evidence along with that evidence too? So it does beg the question of like those two cases are connected. Danny's case as well as this current serial killer case. It might be pointing to the fact that Susanna was actually killed by the serial killer, but, none of the evidence so far has linked the two cases together. Because the guy there was no DNA of his at the crime scene. It's like, but why wouldn't he have any DNA anywhere? Not unless there's someone cleaning up his mess for him, which it seems like that might be Tom. But it's like, for him not to have any DNA, even though he was literally in her apartment, he was in Mimi's apartment, Nico was there, Nico literally wrestled him around, and you're telling me there's not a lick of his DNA anywhere, nothing of his on her. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So they definitely got to have someone on the inside covering some stuff up. Because remember the person, like how he, like last episode, the first victim, she ran into a cop, and that cop is the one that potentially killed her. So it was the killer dressed up like one, as we can still think it's the teacher, not unless for whatever weird reason they have similar wounds or whatever. Not unless it's like the real killer got stabbed, but just to kind of divert attention, or maybe this person's pissed at Ruby's teacher and stabbed him in a similar fashion. I don't know. I mean, there's so many different possibilities of where this could go. So, multiple things I loved in this episode. For one was the whole conversation of like the captain asking like, yo, what's going on here? How do you know? Finally, tell me how you know what you know. And they're like, okay, I went back in time, kind of did a whole spiel about what they're doing. And then Nico's like, yeah, people who usually go through space-time, like fall through the space-time continuum, they kind of have to stick together. And she's just like, I should arrest you both right now and stuff. So that was kind of nice. I mean, they did tell you the truth. It's not their fault that you wouldn't believe them. So, I just thought that was a really nice touch. But also, I'm kind of related to that. It's the whole situation of, once again, the killer dressed up as a cop and a fireman, because that's how they were going. Like, he was about to get close to her if it wasn't for Laura grabbing her and getting to her just in time to, like, prevent the killer from getting Mimi. So, but even with them like doing everything they could, there was no physical evidence to tie the teacher to all the murders and stuff like that, because none of the families recognized the jewelry. So it begs the question of like, either it was a gift from the killer himself, like that particular ring that Laura remembers, maybe that was a gift from the killer himself, and maybe that's why, once again, Tom took a picture of it, because it's like, oh yeah, this is evidence. It's like, I don't know. What's the point of taking the picture of it? I guess to give him proof ahead of time, or maybe it's, once again, maybe that's Tom's way of keeping the killer at bay. Once again, the scarf is ruined, so if it was meant to be as a means of keeping somebody away, maybe this ring presents a new opportunity to be like, oh, I know this actually belongs to you, and you gave it to this particular person. So I don't know. We'll just kind of have to wait and see on that. Because this also was the episode that kind of showed you on multiple occasions, as I spoke up earlier, the whole situation for pulling the gun on the teacher. But also, like, we saw more of her conviction, Laura's conviction, and the fact is there was gas spilling out and Laura was going to light it on fire, but Nico saved him. At first, immediately my brain's like, well, yeah, it's to make sure that Laura doesn't become a killer because he doesn't want her to do that. But at the same time, it's also because, he brought up Ruby. Well, he's Ruby's teacher, and the fact of the matter is he's also but he's the one that possibly killed Serena. So he's like, well, what's the connection there? We need him alive so we can get answers about that. So, and we also found out a little bit more about why Nico got, fired or, from the force. And it seems like he beat up a civilian. I can only assume it must be something obviously related to a case. Either couldn't get the evidence he needed, and maybe at the same time, maybe that's kind of what, he kind of went down that path and it kind of ruined his life, and he didn't want Laura to do the same thing. Maybe it's something connected, in particular to his brother's case. So I don't know. I mean, overall, like I said, a great episode. Obviously, Laura's kind of be pushed in that corner of like, honey, you're acting crazy. Even to the point Tom is like, yo, as the DA, I'm telling you guys to forget about my wife's little outburst. Or do you want me to talk to your boss's boss? It's like, oh, whatever you say, sir, Mr. Price. And it's like, now Laura's looking crazy to him. So it might still turn into that narrative of like, oh, I'm going to take Serena away. It's like, go talk, even saying like, I need you to talk to your therapist. Promise me you'll go see her. So it's going to be a situation of like, she's going to be forced to get professional help. And it's not like she can really talk to anybody about this because the only person she can rely on is Nico. And that's another thing too. It does seem like her and Nico are getting closer and closer each moment, like as the episodes go by. Especially in this episode, obviously there were moments of them just kind of like spending time together, almost like enjoying each other's company. There's even that moment when they were hiding in the teacher's apartment when they snuck in and they were kind of close together like that. So it's like part of me is wondering like when it's all said and done, will there be a thing between Nico and into it, because I just get the feeling like Tom's not going to be around just because he's going to get arrested or something. I'm looking at him as like the bad guy, like whether he's like directly the bad guy or indirectly like he's an accomplice in this whole situation. Like he's going to be found guilty of something. I mean, granted, that's going to be a little weird with the whole Serena situation, but it's like that's where my mind's heading with this. So also kind of along those lines too, I thought it was kind of interesting that there's a whole lock situation for crime scenes. I never knew they did that. I wonder, is that a real thing or is that just something they did for the show? It would make sense because it would prevent people from ever going back to a crime scene. Granted, I've watched quite a few crime dramas. I don't think I've ever seen that. I've seen police tape, sure, but I've never seen an actual lock on a door that you need like a almost like a code to get into like that. I thought that was kind of interesting. Just a little note I just found fascinating. So obviously we have Nico at the end of the episode. Like obviously what's going to happen in the next episode is he's going to be grilled by the captain about like how they know what they know. Yeah, he's neck deep in all of this, but it's like, oh yeah, we prevented victims and stuff like that, but at the same time it's like we can't even get the guy because there's no evidence for him. So it's like, how do you know what you know? It's time for you to really explain that to me. Once again, Nico himself can't explain it any better than Laura can because it's just going to sound crazy, which like I said, that's why I think it's so fascinating. The fact is they both went back in time, not just Laura, both Laura and Nico. So it adds an element of like, there's not just one person that knows about this. There's two people who know about this, and they're both trying to make the best they can out of this. And like I said, Nico's in this also, just because he doesn't want that little girl to die, especially because him and Serena kind of bonded, but also because it's like, his brother died in the other timeline. So now it's a situation of like, I think things are going to work out a lot more than Nico really realizes, because I do believe all these murders, as well as the Serena thing, as well as the Danny situation, all three are connected. I think they're three separate things that are tied together in some shape or form. We just don't know how all the pieces fit together yet. But I think Nico's going to learn it. The fact of the matter is that helping Laura save Serena is going to help save Danny in a lot more ways than he can think. I'm also curious, what's Grace going to do now that she's seen a scarf and she knows it's Serena, because she knows who Serena's mom is and who her dad is. So then that turns into a situation of, is she going to tell Nico this? Because if she tells Nico, I mean, she doesn't know that Nico's hanging around Laura. So, I mean, because the fact is, Tom hid the letter and evidence that Grace sent to Laura. Because the fact of the matter is, if Laura had read what she had written, it would probably have pushed Laura to kind of look through it more, because she's like, oh, what if it was your child that went through this, you know, like your child that might die. And it's like, she's already been through that situation. So she would have been more likely to look into it. But Tom's the one that saw it first, and he hid it from her. He's like, oh, yeah, it's nothing. So the fact is he's hiding it on top of it, like, there's a lot more to it than that. But the thing is, Grace, once again, saw the scarf. I mean, granted, it's been cleaned now, so maybe even if she questions it when it comes up, it's like, no, it was, what are you talking about? Oh, it's just a clean scarf. Oh, yeah. You know, so I don't know if she'll even tell Nico or not. I mean, will she be inclined to tell Nico even more if she finds out he's hanging around Laura so much and everything? So a lot of stuff went down this episode, so we'll have to wait till next week's episode to really see, like, whether anything really comes about a lot of this stuff yet or not. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.